and welcome to Live at the Museum. My name's Penny Vale and I work here at the National Museum of Australia. Before we start, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we are filming today, the Ngunnawal, Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples of Canberra. I pay my respect to their elders past, present and emerging, and I also extend that respect to any and all First Nations people here present and joining us via the live stream. Today on Live at the Museum, we are launching Momentous. And in order to do that, I am joined by one of our lovely curators, Craig Middleton. Hi, Craig.
Hi, Penny.
And via Zoom, Benjamin Law. Hi, Benjamin.
G'day, Penny. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for jumping in via Zoom and for contributing to Momentous.
Oh, I'm so pleased to, and I'm so pleased to be joining you here. I'm sad that I can't be there in person, but I'm stoked to be here joining you from Gadigal land, which is part of the great Eora Nation, modern-day Sydney.
Thank you so much. Right, before we continue on with our conversation, we're going to watch a presentation on the Momentous online collecting project, how it works, and some of the technical stuff behind it. If you have any questions, please pop them in the comment threads straight away. We would love to get to as many questions as possible. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Craig and I'm a curator here at the National Museum of Australia.
And I'm Lakin and I'm a digital producer. And we're going to introduce an exciting new project called Momentous.
Momentous invites Australians from all walks of life, that's you, to contribute your stories of recent events in Australian history. I'm talking about COVID-19, the global pandemic, and also the 2019-2020 bushfire season. Your stories will be added to a growing record of human experiences of these recent crises. Every story is important. Your story is important. From the most unbelievable things that have happened to the everyday, mundane, ordinary moments of your life. And it's often those moments, those ordinary moments, that are the most interesting for social historians and curators. They paint a picture of the complexity and the nuance that is this world we live in. And history is also complex and nuanced. So what we're creating here is going to be a much more accurate, inclusive and diverse representation of this moment in time for future generations of Australians.
On the Momentous website, you can share your story, peruse other people's stories, and then share the stories that resonate to you on social media. There's a really easy 4-step form that guides the user through the process. So you start off with providing your details, then go through your story type, which is text or video, for example, then the background of your story, so more contextual information, and then finally the submission process. During this process, we'll ask you to choose up to 3 of the 8 story qualities that best represents your story: adaptation, anger, change, community, hope, resilience, sadness, and worry.
Once you've submitted your story, you can scroll through and explore other people's stories, find those connections between your experiences and other people's experiences, and really get a sense of how people from the other side of the country have felt in the same moments that you've experienced too. We've invited a range of guest contributors to share their stories with us. These stories are really important, and these people wanted to share something personal about themselves and what they've experienced over these recent events in history. We've got Benjamin Law, we've got Dan Borscher, journalist, and also Tegan Taylor, and many more that you will see. We're hoping that you'll share with us your really personal experiences, when you felt happy, when you felt sad, when you felt anxious. These are the stories of everyday Australians. These are the stories of resilience and the stories of hope that we're trying to capture with this project, and we hope that you'll be able to share those with us.
Craig, can I get you to kick us off? In the video, you talked a little bit about the importance of stories. How are the stories in this project going to be used in future?
Yeah, that's a great question, Penny. Thanks for that. You know, what we're trying to do here with Momentous is really create and capture a picture of these defining moments in Australia's history. That's the 2019-2020 bushfires and the COVID-19 global pandemic. So we're asking you to share your story, and that story will be placed on the official record of history. So we're looking for the unbelievable and the everyday, because that's what captures the messiness that is this moment we're living in right now. So in 100, 200, 1,000 years, historians, curators, and everyday people can look back and really get a sense of what life was like today.
Thank you so much, Craig. Benjamin, you're a professional storyteller. How important do you feel stories are in helping us understand and process what's going on around us?
Well, maybe I'm biased because, like you say, Penny, it's my full-time career, but I do think that stories are the ways that we make meaning of the world, you know. The old Joan Didion quote, which is, we tell ourselves stories in order to live. And for me, as a writer, but sometimes as a reader as well, I often think that I can't really synthesize or process things that have happened until when I'm a reader, when someone else makes sense of it for me through their storytelling. And by storytelling, I don't just mean writing, I mean like they might have made a stage work, it might have been a great documentary, it might have just been a really good news package which explained what just happened and to give us perspective and analysis on the scope of it. And in this year in particular, I think one of the words of the year, I think even Oxford Dictionary listed that unprecedented was one of myriad words they've chosen to define this year. We've experienced a year like no other, and it's been a series of shocks and reverberations. Whether you're living in Australia and we had those catastrophic bushfires across the entire continent at the start of this year, but I even think of, you go to the other hemisphere and America has experienced similar wildfires on their west coast. We are in this kind of state of emergency when it comes to our climate, when it comes to our biological health, when it comes to coronavirus in new ways that we haven't quite experienced on this scale before. And of course, there's an economic crisis too. There's a racial reckoning going on in so many parts of our world. And when that's happening in our everyday lives, I think a lot of us can struggle to process what has happened, but sometimes the act of retelling what happened gives us the opportunity to take stock and understand it more and hopefully help others to do the same.
Okay, so you come from a large-ish and a very close family. Has this year been challenging for you and for them?
Well, to an extent. So one of the things that quite defined this year for my family is the fact that two of our family members, myself and my youngest sister Michelle, we live in Sydney, and the rest of the family lives in Queensland between the Sunshine Coast, Gubbi land, and Brisbane, which is Turrbal and Yagara land. And when the borders closed, it was quite confronting because my younger sister Tammy, sibling number 4, she was scheduled to give birth pretty much in the first week of lockdown. And when it started to feel more palpable and real that the ways in which we conduct our lives was going to change, that was a bit of a shock. And I think the second thing is because childbirth is a medical thing, that it raised a lot of questions. A hospital is going to be safe. We'd been watching what had happened already in China and Italy. Was that going to be the same here? And the funny thing was, it was both funny, shocking, but kind of hilarious, was the fact that my sister's midwife reassured her by saying, "It's okay, honey, whatever happens, I've got a hazmat suit in the boot of my car." Like one of those hazmat suits where you wear to Ebola-stricken nations. She had that in the back of her car, ready to go, because no one knew what was going to happen next. So that was full on, but of course we came good. We all came good.
Slightly terrifying, but maybe reassuring. A hazmat suit in the car.
Absolutely, like the ultimate prophylactic, right?
Craig, can you talk a little bit about what Momentous is and how the project got started?
Yeah, of course. Look, I think what Benjamin just said, that's exactly what Momentous is. It's a storytelling platform. It's a virtual exhibition. It's a website. We're asking everyday Australians to share their stories of profound change with us. So this project started, as early as July 2019, when those first fires ignited in southern Queensland, northern New South Wales, and by November we were getting a sense that the 2019-2020 fire season was unlike no other. It was more intense. There were new weather patterns forming, and so we knew we had to respond, and we knew we had to start documenting this change. And before that fire season ended, on the 25th of January, COVID-19, the very first case was recorded in Australia. And I really just don't need to explain what has happened since then, but what these two events are, mean for Australia and how we move forward. That's what we're trying to capture. So, we're asking people to reflect and share their stories through various means, through text, through audio, through video, and imagery. And we want you to share that with us, from, like I said, the unbelievable to the everyday, from that anxiety that you felt when you had to homeschool your kids, or you saw a plume of smoke in the distance, from stories of childbirth, just like Benjamin's sister, which is an amazing story, but it's also not, it's not isolated. It's a common experience. So we're hoping that people will be inspired and share from what they see and read as well.
Benjamin, can I ask, how did you come to be involved in Momentous?
That's a good question, because my memory is incredibly foggy this year, as I'm sure most people's are. It's like, how did that happen? But pretty sure Craig and the team approached me and asked me if I had any story I wanted to share. And funnily enough, I had been just recording conversations with my family, and it was intended for the ABC at some stage, because they were putting together some Corona stories. But I was just kind of doing it in the background because I wanted to record this very particular moment in time for my family. And so by the time the National Museum approached me, I was like, yeah, I do have something that I can stitch together. It is phone calls between me and my mother, between my sister and myself, before and after she gives birth, because we just knew that we couldn't really see each other anyway. But we wanted to have a time capsule of this very bizarre moment, because it's a cliche, but things happen quick, kids grow up fast. It's not like you can really remember exactly what was happening. And already I think all of our brains were starting to shut down. But my family's incredibly sentimental, almost to the point of pathology. And I think I carry that streak too. And I just wanted to hear, like, if I was recording this now, it was almost this act of clairvoyancy or time travel to know that I would record my sister on the other end. So that's just what I tried to capture in this 2-minute piece that I made for the museum.
It's a really beautiful piece. I'm just going to, quick question for Craig. Are there any limitations on contributing to Momentous?
Yes and no. Limitations in terms of how you want to share your story. There's no limit on your imagination, creativity, and your personal experience. Like I mentioned, we want everything from the unremarkable to the unbelievable, but the limitation is in the technology, where we're asking people to reflect in a bit more of an informed way. So we're asking for no more than 500 words of text, up to 5 images, no more than 5 megabytes each, 2 minutes of audio, and 2 minutes of video, and that is the only limitation. And Benjamin has done an amazing job of condensing what is a very large story into 2 minutes. And you can find his recording on the Momentous website right now.
We're actually going to take a listen to Benjamin's contribution for Momentous. Now, I think that we may be having a couple of technical issues with the Facebook live stream. If you're unable to hear the audio that we're about to play, you can find it on the Momentous site later on, but hopefully all the gods of technology align and everybody can hear it.
Earlier tonight, we got a WhatsApp message from Tammy, your daughter, my sister. What's going on?
She's having a baby.
I spoke to my sister a few days before this moment. So this is your first pregnancy. It's going to be your first baby. How are you feeling generally at the moment?
I'm excited, but I'm also anxious and also a bit sad and disappointed.
the anxiety, what's that about?
I think anxiety is a combination of things. Like, I think it's the unknown because of, not knowing what labour will bring, as well as not knowing what the world is going to be like.
What are you feeling sad and disappointed about?
I think the sadness comes with the fact that, like, you guys in Sydney won't be able to see baby, and also, like, even like mum down the road, like, she literally lives down the road, but she won't be able to hold baby for we don't know how long, I guess.
You can't have family members, even ones down the road like mum, in your personal space or helping out. So what's that been like, not having that compared to how this should have turned out?
In some ways, it's kind of good because because you can, like, focus on your newborn and, like, just your immediate, family, like your husband and like Bruce and I and baby, without any distractions. But at the same time, I foresee that it will be difficult because of that lack of help as well.
And this is Tammy after she had her baby.
His name's Cohen, and he's my little baby who I shot out of me on the 8th, and he is attached to my lip.
Thank you so much for that beautiful contribution, Benjamin. It's so lovely to listen to. I was lucky enough that Craig sent me your initial draft, which was a little bit longer. Do you have any advice for people who want to contribute on how to order or condense their stories?
Well, look, I know one of my problems is usually not writer's block. It's probably the other option, writer's diarrhea, some might call it. So I usually write longer or have longer stories that I need to trim down later. For this thing, for this particular piece, of course, there was just so much more that I had included and could have even included more of, my siblings' voices, all of that sort of stuff. A lot of the original piece was giving context, but for this particular exhibition, these are really snapshots, vignettes, anecdotes where you can really flesh them out in your own mind. Sometimes more things are implied than actually said. So I realized that I didn't need to include all of that contextual stuff, who I am, who my family is, what's happening in the world. We can make those assumptions that you know what's about to happen, and the stakes that are involved. I just wanted to keep the funny bits that told us all that we needed to know, like when my sister says, look, in some ways it's been good. I wanted to make sure that what I did retain was some of the humorous moments in this, because within tragedy sometimes there's quite a bit of comedy to sometimes lighten the load, but I think to remind us that there is texture in all of this. Like one of my friends who escaped the bushfires earlier this year in Batemans Bay, that was a harrowing experience that they went through, but at the same time, there were some absurd moments that she could relay back in the story, and that's what makes those stories so human.
Were there things that you weren't able to include in your first draft that you were really sorry to lose?
But you have to kill darlings when it comes to redrafting and editing. Look, there were some things like, for instance, including the significance of this particular kid, explaining that we do have, step-nephews in my family who I really, really love, but we don't get to see them that often. And so this kid who was coming along was like the first biological entry. There was probably some more context I could have included, which was about the fact that my sister was giving birth to a son and how patriarchal Chinese culture is and how hilariously annoying that can be with those expectations of giving birth to a firstborn son. It feels like we're talking about the Joy Luck Club or something. So there was all that sort of cultural context and texture that I could have included. But look, maybe that's another story for another time. I think what was important for this story and this exhibition was for all of the stories that you see and hear and experience on Momentous now to kind of complement each other and to sort of speak to each other. So I notice in mine, it's really about birth during a pandemic. And then you've got a story like Tegan Taylor's, which is, just a very short insight into parenting and working during the pandemic, which is such a common experience. So there's a sense of needing to be able to pass the relay baton between the stories, so they echo and complement and strengthen each other too.
Craig, can I ask, have you considered what you might contribute to the Momentous project as an individual rather than as a curator?
Thank you for that question, because that's a question I often don't get asked, and most of the time don't even consider, because I'm the one chasing the stories and so fascinated by them, and I want to share other people's stories. But of course I have a story. Everyone has a story. You know, I moved to Canberra from South Australia in mid 2019, so I had these big plans to explore this part of the world that I wasn't familiar with, going to the beaches on the East Coast, going to Sydney every weekend, you know, all of this stuff. And then the fires happened and the main highways closed and it was too dangerous, and then the city was engulfed in smoke. So, you know, that's a really ordinary story, but it's a story of changing plans. And it's my story, and it's everyone's story. So I feel like I will contribute that, of course. So thank you for asking me that.
You're welcome. Benjamin, I think we've all had some funny experiences with technology and distant loved ones since this started. Do you have any moments that stand out in particular?
Oh, I remember on my birthday this year, so it was a socially distanced birthday. It was a birthday where I couldn't spend it with my family, but you know, I made do, and I saw people that I loved in my home city now. But the hilarious thing is, I wanted to make sure that I could see my family by the end of the day. You know, I was just like, hey, can we have a big WhatsApp chat, family to family, at the end of the night for my birthday? And we did. And some background context, my parents are divorced, and I mean, I could say that they really detest each other, which is kind of true, but you basically really can't have them within the same space at the same time. It can happen, but they just won't talk to each other, and that's just accepted, and we can get on with life. But we timed it so that it was going to be Dad first and then Mum second, and then we thought Dad had left the chat, and then Mum came on, but then Dad's video flashed back up. And then suddenly we were all trapped, not just in this room together, but in this incredibly intimate virtual space where you're just looking at each other's faces. And for anyone else who has like divorced parents who can't stand each other and can't be in the same room for a long time, you can imagine the humour and the horror of one of your parents. I mean, this is such a, you know, bless the boomers really, but trying to give them instructions like, not that button, now touch the screen, not that part of the screen, get out of this chat. And by the end, we were just screaming with laughter and crying from horror. Like I felt like I got abs by the end of that. But that would not have happened if it weren't for the fact that we were relying technology like we are now, like my microphone, to keep us afloat. I mean, speaking of microphones, this is how I've been recording, co-hosting my ABC show with this mic in my office. My co-host Beverly has had to broadcast some of the episodes from a self-made cardboard hut, which has been pretty funny. That's your ABC. That's your tax dollars at work.
People are wonderfully ingenious, aren't they?
Yeah.
We have some questions coming in from the audience. This one is from YouTube and it's from Maggie. Craig, she would like to know what kind of stories can she submit?
Yeah, well, I've already mentioned that there's, you know, you can share stories that are audio, video, text, or image, and we're actually asking you to also attach qualities to your story. They might be stories of hope, worry, sadness, resilience, adaptation. So, you know, we're looking for absolutely everything. Don't feel like your story isn't worthy to share, because it very much is, and it will be one of the most interesting to us historians and curators. So please share.
And Maggie's got a follow-up question. What happens to my story after I submit it?
So once you submit your story, it will take about 3 days for it to become live on the website. But that is a really key part of this website and exhibition, that we're not just collecting stories, we're actually representing them. So people who might not feel comfortable sharing their story can still go online and read and view and hear the stories of other people and make those connections, those shared experiences, make those, you know, contrasts between your story and someone else's story. And we really, you know, hope that even if you don't share your story, that you'll still enjoy and reflect on this moment in time.
We've got one coming through for you, Benjamin. This one's from Cheryl, and she would like to know, you shared a story about COVID-19. Do you have any stories about the bushfires?
Yeah, I mean, look, I was in Sydney during the bushfires, and it was quite confronting living in a major world city that was suddenly covered in smoke and you couldn't really breathe. I live quite high in a quite dense apartment block on the 21st floor, and usually I've actually got quite a view that extends right out through the city, and I probably couldn't see a metre out of my window during the worst days of the bushfires. One story is, you know, friends of mine who were trying to escape the bushfires and did, luckily, they had this moment. This is actually a bushfire and pandemic story. They escaped, and when we saw them the next day, you know, we were kind of going through and recapping what they'd experienced, which was really, really intense. My friend said, and this feels so dumb, she has 3 young boys who I'm incredibly close to. She's like, I feel so silly, but I'm so worried about the house, obviously, but I feel so silly that their gift, their kind of belated Christmas gift, was going to be a Nintendo Switch. And I left that back in the house. And I hadn't organised their present by that stage, so I was like, hey, here is a Nintendo Switch. I got to be that very generous uncle, but it was really just like, they'd been through a lot. Here's your Christmas present for the entire family. Their house was fine. So it was totally in the path of the fire, but it was fine. It could have easily burnt down because so many houses around there did. But now it also meant she had 2 Nintendo Switches, which I didn't think about until the pandemic happened. And then Nintendo Switches all over the world sold out. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this pandemic's going to be so intense. I need something else besides books and what I usually have. I need something to lose myself in. Nintendo would be amazing. Do you still have a second Nintendo? So that act of generosity, that ostensible act of generosity, I thought I was being generous at the start. No, I was actually just buying myself a Nintendo Switch and playing the long game.
It was karmic balance, perhaps.
Yeah, thank you. That's what I'm going to, that's the moral of the story for me. Absolutely.
Cheryl would like to know why you chose an audio story over any other format.
Look, my tendency is usually to write. There was kind of a question whether I could submit something for the ABC, but beyond that, I wanted to get my sister's voice in there. I wanted to hear my mother's voice. I wanted to remember what we sounded like in the conversations that we were having around this time. I wanted to capture the moment of my mother on the evening where we both realised that our sister was giving birth to her son, and my mum's grandson and my nephew. So there was something just about that I wanted to really collect and hold on to preserve.
Craig, we've got a question from Tony. He would like to know, as a class, are they able to get students to contribute, and is there an age limit for the Momentous website?
That's an excellent question. You know, we don't have an age limit on submissions, but when you submit, you will be asked to provide your age, and if you're under 11, your personal details won't be shared on the website. And if you are concerned about putting personal details like first names, ages, locations on the website, there's a button you can click for an anonymous entry. So we'd really encourage you to do that, and none of your personal details will be shared. And particularly if you are a class teacher and you're wanting to do something around this project with your class, we encourage you to do that, because those experiences of young people, again, are different to the experiences of those who are older, and are really important to how today is.
We're coming to the end of the program. We do have time for a couple more questions. If we don't get to your question, we will respond in the public comments. So just keep asking away, but make sure that they're, particularly for YouTube, they're in the public comment thread, not the live comment thread, because if they're in the live one, we will lose them and we won't be able to answer them. Heidi would like to know, do you think sharing these stories might help people heal? I'm going to throw that question to you first, Benjamin. So what do you think?
Yeah, I think that sometimes, I mean, this is what I get from reading, this is what I get from listening to radio, this is what I get from watching television and documentaries, great plays, great films, which is sometimes there are things that we go through life where, as I said at the start, we haven't really processed the meaning. And I think sometimes hearing other people tell stories or being able to have an opportunity to tell your own means that you draw out the connections between what actually happened that might not have been obvious as they were happening. You know, so much of storytelling is action, 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 reflective thought. That's a classic structure of how stories are told on radio, in print, online. And sometimes we don't have that time for reflective thought. We know what happened, we can tell the story at the dinner party, but can we get to the point where we derive meaning from it? And often the only way we can do that is by telling the story or by receiving the story. So hopefully that's a part of the process of healing too.
We've got more a comment than a question. Lily says that it's an important living archive for Australia, Momentous, and then says Animal Crossing has been an important escape for 2020. Have you got addicted to any kind of Facebook games, Benjamin?
Look, they are not alone. I know Animal Crossing has been my co-host of Stop Everything on ABC Radio National. We talk about Animal Crossing a lot because she's lost herself to that game. I got so obsessed with Zelda Breath of the Wild because it was the first time I'd even played video games in almost 20 years, and I'm like, wait, this is what a video game is now? And I got so completely consumed by it that I played one session until 2 a.m. and I missed an important meeting the next day. That's how lost I became in that world. It's not a very dignified thing to admit, but that's my life now.
They're very immersive. Nintendo makes some excellent games.
Thank you.
Rowan would like to know how we're going to ensure that the site is available for the future. Is it going into the NMA collection or is it being archived in some way? Craig?
Yeah, great question. And yes, so when you submit your story, you're also giving the museum permission to officially collect your story and then archive it. And you know, we're not only collecting the materials that you're submitting to the site, so we will keep all of those files, but the website, when it's run its course, when we've passed this moment in time, we're going to archive the website too, and there's an amazing program, Pandora, that does that, and this will be a record that is long lasting.
All right, we really are coming to the end of the program, unfortunately, but I have a couple of questions for each of you before we go. First up, Benjamin, I would really like to know, how are Tammy, Bruce and Cohen doing now?
Oh, look, they're going great. Cohen is 7 months old. There's a whole WhatsApp thread between my family. It's just called Mr. Baby, which is what we called him before he had a name. And I go to that thread every day to see like latest Cohen developments. Sometimes I kind of like scream out and my boyfriend thinks that it's like breaking news from the US election or something. But no, there's just been more Cohen updates. He's tasted his first mango, he's eaten his first piece of broccoli or something, and it's just delightful. He's a good kid. I can't wait to see him again.
In the first cut of your contribution, you mentioned a saying from your mother about patience. Could you share that with our audience?
Yeah, my mum always said this thing that deeply irritated me when I was growing up because I was always in such a rush and she hated being rushed. And she always said, patience is love. And that's been a really good mantra for me to actually hold on to, especially this year, because for a lot of us, things have been about waiting, waiting for borders to open, waiting for, those of you who are in Melbourne, waiting for the lockdown restrictions to end. And that's really, really tough. But we're waiting and being patient for the ones that we love. And my mum's right, annoyingly, as she always is.
Mums are like that, aren't they? Craig, for people who are watching and would like to share their story or experience, how can they contribute to Momentous?
Really easy. Go to momentous.nma.gov.au. You can find the links to this project through the National Museum of Australia's website, social media platforms. Type it into Google with NMA after it, you'll find it, and then there's a really easy submission project. So please, join us in making history.
Right. Well, thank you both so much, Craig and Benjamin, for joining us today to launch Momentous. I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes of it. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, you may want to subscribe to the museum's channel, and those of you on Facebook, you might like to turn on live notifications so that you don't miss future Live at the Museums. This is the last Live at the Museum for 2020. Our next Live at the Museum will resume January 28th at 12:30 p.m. and it's featuring the Endeavour Voyage exhibition with our senior Indigenous curator Margot Neal and award-winning filmmaker Alison Page. We also have an upcoming live-streamed event with Lerida Estate Winery, a virtual wine tasting and Australian wine history. That is on Wednesday the 9th of December between 6 and 7. Check the NMA website for further details. And a huge thank you to all of our viewers, especially those of you who have tuned in and supported every Live at the Museum program throughout the year. Yes, David S., I'm looking at you. Thank you, everybody, so much. Once again, thank you so much for joining us, Benjamin, and thank you so much for contributing to Momentous.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you, Craig.
Thank you, Penny.
We'll see everybody in January.